Welcome to another edition of Rock Show Critique with Thom and Joe. This time around, we bring you what our personal top five live albums are of all time. And man, what a selection of choices.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I appreciate the fact that I get top billing Thom and Joe. I assume it's alphabetical, Jennings pseudo, because obviously alphabetically Joey comes before Thom. So, but I like Thom and Joe. It has that kind of Tom and Jerry connotation, so it works out well. Rolls off your tongue nicely.
There you go. All right, so like you said, wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy task with all the different live albums that we've been able to. I mean, we probably could have done it by a decade because there's been, there were so many great live albums in the 70s and the 80s had a few. I wouldn't say they had a lot more than the 70s, but and then everybody's come out with a live album pretty much at least since then to update their live sound and their situations there. Like Styx, obviously, have made a few live albums after the Caught in the Act CD came out back in the mid '80s, which definitely was one of the top '80s ones, but it didn't make my list.
Yeah, it's interesting when I think of like live album. I think of the heyday of live albums, which was really around the era that Frampton Comes Alive sort of renewed everybody's interest in live albums. And I think the practical reason a lot of bands did live albums in the 70s and 80s, maybe before and somewhat after Frampton, was because of contractual obligations. I mean, these guys were putting out one album a year, and they'd sign record contracts where the record labels would say, hey, we need product, we need product, we need product, and they'd have to keep churning it out. So the two things you fall back on are greatest hits and live albums. So, but Frampton, of course, changed the narrative because Frampton was one of those guys that he put out a live album that far surpassed sales of any of his previous studio albums.
Right.
I think that was unusual at that time, because usually, a live album would come out because the artist had all these big hits and they just wanted to kind of regurgitate them and rework them and just try to sell them again. But in the case of Frampton, those songs that weren't hits in studio form suddenly became hits on a live album. And it changed everything. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, this episode, we don't want to have it too long in the tooth here. We narrowed it down to just five to make it harder on us by only choosing five. But we can mention some honorable mentions later on at the end here. So let's start rolling off with your number five. What do you got for us?
Oh, you want something a little bit outside of the box? You want something something semi-normal? This one is one that you probably don't. A lot of people don't know, but I actually have the vinyl, by the way, for all of these.
Oh,
you recognize this guy?
Yeah, David Johansen.
David Johansen. Live It Up, Live It Up. I don't know how they mean it to be pronounced, but either way, man, I just love this record. And back in the day when it came out, the radio was playing his Animals medley, which was We Got to Get Out of This Place, Don't Bring Me Down, and It's My Life. And it, when you first hear it, you think, geez, this guy sounds like Eric Burdon. But man, just, I saw David Johansen. The reason I purchased this record is because David Johansen was on the bill with The Who and The Clash at Rich Stadium. He was the opening act. So I really fell in love with his music at that point. And as everyone knows, I'm a big Todd Rundgren fan. Of course, Todd produced the first New York Dolls album. But and David Johansen is, of course, Joey. What was his other ego where he had a hit with?
His other ego?
You don't know the other name that he recorded under?
No. Give it to me.
You.
Give it to me. Yes, you did.
Feeling hot, Mr. Buster Poindexter. It's the same guy.
Ah.
Yeah. So that's your bit of trivia for the day. I'm glad to say that I've stumped you on some form of music trivia.
All right. Yeah, you got me on that one. I mean, I've heard of it now that you come to think about it, but I definitely did not know it off the top of my head for sure.
Yeah, but give this album a listen. It's a great record. It's it really is. It's not something that is real mainstream, as I said, but man, it's a great record.
What year did that one come out in?
I think it's 82-ish. Let me see if I can find it on the back here. Yeah, 1982. Look at that.
Hey.
Even from memory, I found it, so not bad.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Well, my choice for the fifth best live album of all time, and you're looking right at the shirt here. That's why I'm wearing it. Kiss Alive 2. Although it wasn't a complete live album because the side four was the studio tracks, but it was three sides live, and then the following fourth side came out back around 1977, I believe. Back in the height of Kiss, when they were bigger than anything alive. Uh, as far as that was probably their biggest stretch. They were just on fire. That was when they hit their commercial peak, and then obviously after that's when they started trending downward.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's got it only the cool thing about this album as opposed to their live album was that it actually featured songs from the previous three studio albums that weren't on the previous live albums. So you didn't get no duplicates. So obviously there's no Rock and Roll All Night, no Strutter stuff like that. But that made it more of a collector's edition because it gave the fans live versions of other songs that they never had before, which was cool.
Yeah, very cool. No, I Kiss Alive 2, of course. It's interesting that that's the second of the two live albums, but I think that is generally accepted as the album that kind of put Kiss over the top, you know.
Yeah, Kiss Alive was the one that put them on the map. I feel that's
Yeah.
they always say, but Kiss Alive 2 was right in right in that height of everything of where they really, Glove Gun came out and they were just everywhere. No matter where you looked, there was Kiss. Then of course the next year, 1978, Kiss meets the Phantom of the Park movie. They did everything. That's no denying that, right?
Oh Lord, that movie. I don't even know if because I'm a little bit older than you are, but man, that movie was so bad. I don't know that I've ever seen a worse movie. It was just so awful. But hey, it is what it is.
All right, what do you got for your number four?
Man, this is just tough because I gotta leave at least one of them out. And man, it's I told you I was kind of doing some last minute trying to figure out which one I was gonna pick. And
Uh-huh.
I'm just gonna flash this one really quick. Todd Rundgren, Back to the Bars. I'm not gonna do that one because it'd just be too darn obvious, and I'm too jaded when it comes to Todd. I love him too much. But we're gonna do this one. And Joey, this may be one that is on both of our lists. I'm guessing. What do you think?
We'll see. That's a good choice, though. It was definitely
Yeah.
considered. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Kinks, one for the road. Now, I'll tell you what I love about this record is it's very raw sounding. I think that the material that they perform, that's their, the 60s stuff, like the You Really Got Me and All the Day and All the Night and all that stuff. It just takes on a very raw kind of punk sound to it. And it's interesting because, of course, Ray and his brother Dave are notorious for having this very tense relationship. And I think on some level, you feel that in the music, which is kind of cool, And I don't know, man. I mean, to me, there's not a bad cut on this record. And one of the songs that I used to really love listening to back in the day that really got me going was 20th Century Man. And that's it. It's interesting because when Ray Davies played Buffalo the last time he did the solo show, he did that song. But my God, you go through the track listing on this thing, it really makes you appreciate the two distinct eras of the Kinks. That first kind of British invasion era where they had a whole slew of hits, and then of course they were banned from touring America for a period of time, and then they had that revitalization in the U.S. and the low budget Give the People What They Want era, which is low budget was before this one came out. Give the People What They Want was later. But I don't know, I love this record. Not a bad millisecond on it, not a bad cut on it. I still listen to it frequently, still love it.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great one. Just didn't quite make the cut for me. But this is the choice I got for my number four. Probably gonna throw you here. This is like my dark horse, just because I just love the sound and the powerful, and how can you go wrong when they say no overdubs to fix the rubs, no tricks or studio jive, the good and the bad gave all we had. So that is none other than Cinderella live at the Key Club. A very
Oh,
unknown
wow.
album, really, but Tom Kiefer sounding pretty good after he started having some vocal issues in the mid '90s. This one actually was recorded in '98 and was released in 1999. Just a great sounding album. It's got all their big hits on there, and of course some of the standards that they've become known for over the last while of their career there. Definitely a must album for any Cinderella fan.
Well, yeah, I'm not. I'm not. I don't want to say I'm not a Cinderella fan. I mean, I'm not, but it's not because I don't like them. It's because I'm just really not familiar with their music. So I think that this is another. We've done these shows before where there's a certain we have our wheelhouses. I think Cinderella was one of those bands that really came along at a time that they really spoke to you. So that's pretty cool that you like that live album.
Yep. And what do you got for number three for us here?
Oh my goodness. I mean, this one should be on everybody's list on the planet. Uh Man, I never forget the first time I heard this baby. Look at that. Cheap
I
Trick at Budokan. Man, look at this. I mean, you know, it's I actually have both versions on vinyl. There's the extended version, which is supposedly the complete concert, and it's billed as the complete concert, but I don't think it's the actual complete concert, which those recordings have come out later from their run at the Budokan. But just again, kind of going back to the whole Kinks thing, just the power. I'll tell you what one of the things that I really love about this record is the sound of the drums. They just get the drums right. They have a lot of pop to them. When they do "Ain't That a Shame," that kind of drum intro in the beginning, and I had the honor of interviewing Booty Carlos at one point, and I told him how much I love that drum solo at the beginning, and he mentioned to me that it was just a like a mashup of all these famous drum bits that were from other songs, like the breakdown in on Beatles Abbey Road, and some other things. So it really made me appreciate it that much more. But man, these guys, this classic lineup, this four piece, there was nobody like them. Now Cheap Trick's still putting out great music, but I don't know. To me, there's no other lineup that came close to these four. With all due respect to Dak Nielsen on drums now, and of course when John Brandt was with him for a little while, and Pete Comita or whoever else. This was it, man. These four guys from Rockford, Illinois, put out one of the greatest live albums of all time, and this is the album that kind of launched their career in the U.S.
Oh yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things, exactly what you just mentioned there. I believe this album, kind of like Frampton, even though Cheap Trick was a little bit more well known, when this album came out, it definitely was their top selling album that came out after the first three albums that came out, and it just lit up people knew who Cheap Trick were after that album. No doubt about
Yeah,
it.
and what's fascinating is the record was released in Japan. It was a Japan only live album. They didn't even plan to release it in the U.S. and it started getting some airplay in the U.S. and that's what eventually forced them to put it out in the U.S. And then it delayed the release of Dream Police because they already had Dream Police ready to go. Back to what we were talking about at the beginning, these contractual obligations. So they were doing well in Japan. They were just going to put out this one disc live album in Japan and not, then turn around and put out Dream Police. And it sold so well, they actually had to delay the release of Dream Police. So very cool stuff, man. A lot of great history behind it. But said at the end of the day, it is the epitome of just great rock and roll music. I mean, that's just good old fashioned arena rock.
And if you want to really get technical there, that actually is their best selling album. out of every single album they have. That's their best selling is the at Budokan.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, 'cause not too many people can say their live album is their biggest selling album. That's not actually, you
Oh,
know.
Frampton. I mean, Frampton Comes Alive, Scott. I don't
Well,
think he
that's
ever
a
had anything
we
else.
yeah
I mean, the other one too, but I don't know why. That would be an interesting like trivia question for like a Final Jeopardy or something. Name people that had live albums that sold better than their studio albums. I mean, I obviously Frampton, Cheap Trick. I can't think of anybody else off the top of my head.
right. All right, so that was your number three. Um, so mine goes back to the year 1979, and let's see if you can name this album. Um, give you a little bit of a hint here. See how good you are here.
Ooh.
Okay, it's
19,
adult.
1979, Bob
Yep.
Seger, Live Bullet.
Nope. Wrong answer.
All right, go ahead.
All right, so it's actually going to be none other than Freddie Mercury and the Boys, Queen Live Killers.
Wow.
Phenomenal, phenomenal live album. Double live. It's got everything you can only imagine on there. It's going through pretty much a great selection of their songs, and it actually gives you a couple other ones that, where the songs weren't big in the US, but they were bigger overseas. Like you get Love of My Life, 39, Don't Stop Me Now, which really never took off in the US. It was always big over in London and Britain and all that stuff. Uh, but yeah, phenomenal. Just get one listen to Sheer Heart Attack live, and that will tell you how the album is. It just starts from beginning to end. There's nothing but pure joy, and definitely highlights Queen during their period of time. Pretty much after that is kind of when they went more commercial, and that's when, everything kind of fell apart. But that album right there definitely shows Queen in their finest moment for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I had it here in my stack because it was one that was considered for my top five. Didn't quite make it, but I definitely respect that choice. It's a cool album. I think one of the things that I like about it now I didn't really like about it as much when I first heard it, because when I was younger, it seemed like all the songs didn't sound like the studio versions enough for me. But that's something that I've come to appreciate, that it really does show that as a live band, they really were, a live band. They were really playing, and they weren't so hung up on sounding perfect as they were really putting on a high energy show. I mean, the intro is the rocked up version of "We Will Rock You" instead of the thumping version that we know with the hand claps and the stomps. And yeah, like you said, just some cool cuts, man. "Don't Stop Me Now" is that's a great song. I
Oh yeah.
that's Queen. It's funny. I just bought a brand new copy of A Night at the Opera today to replace a copy that had worn out, and they did some stuff, studio and live, that has just never been repeated. So great choice, Joey. I definitely love that one.
All right, so now we're going down to the final two. This should really get interesting here.
Oh
What do you
Lord,
what do you
it's
got for us? Yeah.
difficult, difficult. Oh man, I love this record. I love it. You know this one?
Wings Over America.
Wings Over America. You got all
Yeah.
this stuff going on with Paul McCartney now and the Get Back record. I mean, this is a triple. I mean, it was such great packaging. I'll tell you what I find. The band that Paul had, that he had put
Hmm.
together for Wings, and you notice that it says on it, Wings Over America, and there was a period of time where it was Paul McCartney and Wings, but at least on this record and kind of in the early stages, it was Wings. And I think that this album captures Wings as a band. Yeah, it's a band with Paul McCartney as the leader and the de facto leader. Nobody's gonna say, oh, it's Denny Lane's band that just happens to have Paul McCartney as a member of it. But they really gelled well as a live unit. And I think with Paul, he was somebody that wanted to tour, and which is proved by the fact that he's still touring. I mean, I think he's got to be close to 80 years old if he's not already 80. And there's a level of enthusiasm in his performance that you wouldn't necessarily get with somebody that had just been touring year after year after year. I mean, this is 1976, so it had been what 10 years since the Beatles had toured. Um, he doesn't do a ton of Beatles stuff, so it's not like he's going out there and just trying to live off the old glories. I mean, he's playing like he's got something to prove. So I love his bass playing on it. His voice was never better. And between this one and Tripping the Live Fantastic, it's pretty close. I mean, that Tripping the Live Fantastic band was pretty phenomenal as well. But I got to give higher marks to this Wings Over America, just because of some great stuff, and just a really well put together band that was just playing with a lot of vim and vigor.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting choice. Yeah, definitely. Good album. Yeah, great choice. All right, so yeah, number two is for me here. You got yours there with the Wings, and mine is going to be none other than 1985's Live After Death, Iron Maiden, the
Ah,
double live album from the World Slavery Tour, which was the biggest tour to date at that point as far as production and everything. It featured, I think it was something like 6 or 7 semis had to bring all this because they had like an ancient Egypt theme. So to bring it to every town, they had to have 6 or 7 semis to bring this thing around. Unfortunately, I never got to see it, live, that actual tour. But there's a lot of DVDs out of it, and anybody that ever sees the DVD and everything, you can only imagine how much is involved in that whole tour. So they recorded a bunch of shows from it. Obviously, you always remember one of the key things is Bruce Dickinson yelling, "Scream for me, Long Beach!" He's known for that. That's you hear a lot of that on the album because most of the album, a lot of it was recorded between Long Beach Arena, and I think the Hammersmith Odeon is where side 4 comes into play. But the Long Beach Arena was done over a series of a couple nights, and they picked the best tracks from each there. But I'm not sure how big of an Iron Maiden fan you are, but this was pretty much probably the best Iron Maiden set list you'll ever find as far as if you pick one tour where it's got pretty much all their great, phenomenal songs. It even goes back to the Paul Diano era where they did Wrathchild and a lot of the older Running Free, some of the older songs that Bruce didn't even sing on the initial albums. But yeah, great album. Thumbs up, number two for me.
awesome. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a funny story about Iron Maiden is that when I was young, when I was like in high school, I was dating a girl whose mother was a born again Christian, and she used to take me to these like seminars on the evils of rock music and the real satanic bands. And so I was a Styx fan, and Styx was supposedly satanic, and you had the whole backwards Led Zeppelin. But when it came to like Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, any of those bands,
Hmm.
man, they really scared the crap out of me. Even AC/DC. So there was a lot of bands that when they were around, I was just literally, kind of freaked out that if I listened to them, that I was literally on the highway to hell. So I think that's why I never really garnered an appreciation for Iron Maiden, because they have that kind of dark imagery. But as you and I both know, that's not. Yeah, you said even like with Black Sabbath, it's really. I mean, hopefully, I don't go to hell for saying that I'm not going to hell, but it's music, folks. It's music, but I appreciate. I mean, Iron Maiden's I think one of those bands that falls in the category. You'll probably agree with me. You either know like every note of their music, or you don't. You barely know anything. And I
Yeah.
mean, their big song was, of course, that I remember was the one that gave me nightmares was 666, the number of the beast. And I felt that if I listened to that one, I was doomed to eternal damnation. So as I've gotten older, I've realized that that's probably not going to happen. But I just thought you might find that funny, being an Iron Maiden fan.
All right, that brings us down to the number one choice. Let's get some drum rolls. What do you got?
Well, I had to debate between two records, and I could almost do a
All
two
right.
record tie. I mean, but that would be kind of cheesy. So this guy's getting an honorable mention. We all know that Allman Brothers Live at the Fillmore is generally touted as the greatest live album of all time. But in my humble opinion, the greatest live album ever recorded, the greatest live album in my collection, hands down, the one that I love the most. Quick story. There's never a quick story for me, is there, Joey? My wife asked me not too long ago. She says, "Honey, what's your favorite record album?" And I told her, and she was shocked that it wasn't a Todd Rundgren record because it was this album, this live album. Not only my favorite live album, my favorite album. There it is. I hope you know this one, Joey. Little Feat, Waiting for Columbus.
Wow.
Now,
No, I'm not too familiar with it.
oh my goodness. So, my friend, a guy named John Kelly, he introduced me to this many years ago, and he says, hey, you got to hear this band. They sound like the Grateful Dead if the Grateful Dead was like really tight and played their instruments well. So I was like, really? And sure enough, I think that in some ways that captures the vibe of it. They've got this, I don't know if you're familiar with the group, the Meters. They've got that kind of, sometimes they got this funky New Orleans sound. There's a lot of slide guitar. They got some honky tonk piano. Bill Payne, who's a keyboardist on here, he's played with the Doobie Brothers in recent years, has a very distinct sound. The group, the Dixie Chicks, got their name from the song Dixie Chicken, and that's on here. But they've got songs on here that are like 18 minutes long, and then they got some that are 3.5, 4 minutes long. But this is just a wild ride. It's a fun album. If you're into jam bands, obviously you know this record. But even if you're not into jam bands, this is a record you gotta listen to. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's always good to, be put onto an album that I'm not familiar with. So yeah, definitely sounds like something. I mean, I'm obviously I'm familiar with Little Feat, but I'm not really familiar with their whole catalog because by the time I got into knowing anything about them, they were already. It was like the mid to late 80s, I think, when that Let It Roll
Yep.
came out, which is,
Yep.
great stuff there. I just never had a chance to go back and listen to their earlier catalog. But now you, Mr. Jennings, gave me something to go back and look into this, and that's what I'm going to do once I get the opportunity. That's going to be on my list here.
And you know what? I'm going to listen to Iron Maiden now that I'm pretty sure I'm not going to go to hell. And, and I promise you won't go to hell if you listen to Little Feat.
All right. Well, I hope I can hold you to that. All right.
Yeah, you'd be like in front of Satan going, "But Tom told me I wasn't going to go to hell."
All right. So
All right, what do you got?
Yep. I got none other than the greatest live album of all time. Came out in 1978. It actually came out intended to ape the poor production values offered by contemporary bootleg records, even going as far as to giving incorrect track listings and missing tracks that were on it that weren't showing.
Ooh,
Obviously, we are
ooh,
talking about none
let me
other
guess.
than.
Aerosmith?
There we go. Live bootleg, baby. Nothing tops this live album. I mean, it's got all the warts of a real true bootleg. I mean, you got Tyler messing up lyrics to Sick as a Dog. I mean, you've got, great versions of songs like Chip Away to Stone. This is probably the first area where anybody ever even heard that song was on this live album. And then the studio versions were released later on down the road. It actually takes you back. Most of the performances were recorded in like 76, 77 and 78. And then 73, it has a couple tracks from when they played this place called Paul's Mall back in when they first started out. They did a couple covers, and that's where, if you noticed how it picks up with a little different sound when it gets to I Ain't Got You, and of course, Mother Popcorn there. So those are two old standards. One's a James Brown song, the other one Calvin Carter was the writer on. And of course, the whole album ends in all with none other than the old cranking train kept a rolling all
All night
night
long.
long. Yeah, so I mean, it's a great complete live album. They didn't really do too much to it, they just put it out, and it's definitely for me that was another album there that helped me get into the band because I came in, a little bit after all this stuff came out. So that was one of the great things about discovering Aerosmith for me was going back and checking out all their old recordings, like from the '70s, because I didn't really get turned on to them to like the real early '80s. So, and at that point, they were a mess with Joe Perry already off playing with the project and had left Aerosmith. Brad Whitford wasn't around anymore; he had quit. And then they made the one album, "Rockin' a Hard Place," with Jimmy Crespo. And hard to believe that was only 3 years later, So this album pretty much came out when the band was pretty much already at the tail end of their first breakup there, back when and then I think it was another year later, 1979, where the spilt milk incident at the Cleveland's World Series of Rock and Roll show, where one of the wives had a big battle, and that was pretty much the end of the band right there, where Joe Perry left, and so it was down to just Tyler, Joey Kramer, and well, Whitford hung around for a little bit, and then he ended up leaving as well. So
Yeah. Well, interesting choice. Yeah. I mean, I remember when that record came out, and like you said, the warts and all that kind of stuff. It was definitely people were very opinionated when it came to it. Some people appreciated the kind of rawness of it, and other people just were like, this was the problem with Aerosmith, is that they weren't they were an inconsistent live band in that era, because a lot of it depended on whether the members showed up on drugs, or if they were fighting, or any of that kind of stuff. So they got their act together later on, and obviously they're a very iconic band and have survived a lot of band drama. But yeah, I mean do they even have any other live albums after that one? I mean, they must have done something.
yeah, they did. They made another one that came out in like the late '90s, which
Okay.
featured some of the new, the more recent hits off of Pump and I think Get a Grip, was it? Yeah, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, they definitely have another one. It's called South of Sanity.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not familiar with that one, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting, just that arena rock era. It's funny. I think about it sometimes when I go to concerts now, about the difference between then and now in terms of approach to live performances, because bands, they just tune on stage in between songs, or play out of tune, or do whatever. Now so much of it's a controlled environment. You're swapping out guitars from one song to the next, or you're pumping in background vocals to make them sound
Mm,
perfect. And
yeah.
it's kind of crazy. I miss the good old days in some respect, with those rawness, like you said, on that kind of recording.
Yeah, definitely. So you got any honorable mentions for us?
Man, I got so many honorable mentions. I wouldn't even worry. I mean, I'll throw out there, obviously, Bob. I mentioned Bob Seger, Live Bullet. I
Live
love that
Bullet.
record.
Yep.
And Nine Tonight. Both of them, I think, are excellent representations of his live music. Grateful Dead, Skull and Roses. Um, the Supertramp Paris is another great live album that I love. The Who Live at Leeds
Oh yeah.
is one that I listened to, and some newer stuff. Government Mule came out with a triple live stuff, and one that probably should have made my list, but I don't have it on vinyl, is Joe Bonamassa live at the Royal Albert Hall, which has this version of Just Got Paid on it that's just off the charts. And actually, there's a ZZ Top live album too that has that was like kind of, I think, 1981ish. That was when they were still pretty raw. They didn't really have the keyboards and stuff in them, and that was a lot of fun to listen to. And I don't know. I mean, I could go on. There's Clapton live albums that I love. There's you know, like I said, I could talk live albums forever. I love live albums. I mean, that it's just you and I, we go to a lot of shows because there's a certain energy in a live performance that doesn't necessarily exist in the studio. And that's not to say that I don't love listening to Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon for its studio wizardry, but if I have my druthers, I'd rather crank up the stereo and throw on Cheap Trick at Budokan and hear that thundering drum solo at the beginning of Ain't That a Shame.
Yeah, I'll throw out a couple here real quick. REO Speedwagon, you get live, you get what you play for.
Yeah, yeah.
You
I
have remember that one?
just listened to that yesterday on the way.
Wow.
Yeah,
Talk about
what a wow, what a great. Well, Stick REO announced their tour with Styx and
Loverboy.
Loverboy, and I was thinking, man, I haven't listened to REO in a while, and I threw that one on, and I tell you what I love about that album is it's Cronin. A lot of you really hear Cronin's like kind of folky influence on a lot of those songs, and but yeah, I mean that's a point where REO before they got too super commercial. Even Greg Philbin, who was a bass player before Bruce Hall,
Hmm.
is an underrated player. And Neil Doughty, is it Doughty or Doty? I don't know how they pronounce it, but his keyboard work on that record is outstanding. And Rich Rath is just a beast. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
he just blows through all these solos, and I'm like, my God, this guy's insane. He was such a great guitarist. Why isn't he still on more lists of top guitarists of all time?
Yeah, thank God we got this live album to at least have that
Yeah,
experience of seeing him live because it's
yeah,
really sad that that's pretty much the only real officially released live album, with the band and with him on it, unfortunately. Um,
yeah, yeah.
but another live album, I got two more that come from the band called Whitesnake, Live in the Heart of the City, which came out in 1980. Um, Mostly it was an import, so it was kind of hard to get. And then they came out with another live album, and they also had a DVD called Live in the Still of the Night, which focused from their 2005 tour. Which, if you ever want to see a great DVD, that is definitely one we recommend because it not only does it feature like Whitesnake songs from the big US hits that everybody knows. They also managed to sneak in some that the London fans always appreciated before Whitesnake hit it big over here. So it's got a good overall feel of the whole Whitesnake catalog on there, and that just phenomenal playing by Reb Beach and back then Doug Aldrich was in the band and Timothy Drury, who used to play keyboards for the Eagles, is on that one. Marco Mendoza, and of course on drums, none other than the madman himself, Mr. Tommy Aldridge. Great live album. I definitely recommend anybody who thinks Whitesnake's just a hair band or whatever. That's one DVD you definitely want to watch. You would definitely appreciate that band for sure. That's the one that really showcases everything that Whitesnake's all about.
Yeah, Coverdale. I mean, he's a great live performer. He's always been a good voice and that kind of stuff. And I'll tell you another one that just popped in my head while we were talking too. Not that it had anything to do with Whitesnake. Was those that Rush album, All the World's a
Oh,
Stage. That kind of came out around the same time as the one we were just talking about, the REO Speedwagon one. So that's a great one as well. And Yes, put out some great live albums. I have those. Genesis. I mean, I don't know. You can't really pick one of theirs. I mean, I think Three Sides Live is great. Seconds Out,
seconds
but
out, yeah.
yeah, there's so many great live albums out there. I said it's an interesting exercise to just kind of pick five because I think really the five that we chose probably are just the five this week. And if we did this in 10 weeks, we'd probably come up with at least two or three different ones on our top five, I would think.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, I think that's a wrap on this episode, or we can talk all night. We don't want to be doing that. Our wife will kill us. So, yeah, thanks for this episode, and we'll catch you guys in a couple weeks here. We're going to be ranking the top 10 Yes albums for all you diehard progressive fans, because Tom had mentioned Yes. That one is definitely going to be an episode you don't want to miss.
Yeah, and I think what we'll do, Joey, is maybe we'll start out with a review of the Quest rather than put it in the top 10. I mean, it's not in the top 10. It's we'll discuss what it is as far as an album, and I like the album, and I think you and I have said that we both like it. So maybe what we'll do is we'll discuss the new Yes album, and then we'll pick the top 10 Yes albums of all time after
Yeah.
that. So that'd be a nice one. Are we agreeing no live albums? Or are we doing live and studio?
No, just studio.
Okay, just studio. Because we just did live albums. So,
Exactly. All right.
all right, man.
Well, sounds good, man. Until next week, guys. Take care and be on the lookout for us. We'll be on the air soon.
And don't forget to subscribe to both of our channels if you get a chance, too. So,